The day the vote came, a dry wind swept across the Pan-African spire in Nairobi and rattled the solar sails, like nervous fingers on glass. From the rooftop garden, you could see the equatorial ring faint as a hair around the planet. And beyond that, if you squinted through the noon glare, 3 jump gate beacons, pulsing in patient sequence. To tourists, those lights were pretty. To diplomats, they were arteries. To President Amara Klein, watching the sky from a bench of recycled basalt, they were potential tourniquets. "Ma'am," said her chief of staff, Mikkel Rao, stepping into the sun. "The convergence feeds are live. They've started roll call." Klein stood, smoothing a suit lacquered with nanoflora that wicked off sweat and dust. "Any whip counts from our side. 3 dozen undecideds last night. This morning, most of them broke against us." He hesitated. "Vadra's whispering about enforcement fleets pre-positioned at the Lighton arches." "I couldn't confirm." Klein's jaw set. "You were right not to try." They descended through the chilled core of the spire while the world climbed toward the hour. Nairobi's arteries moved efficiently, maglevs humming, drones ferrying algae protein to street markets, citizens moving with the calm of a people trained by a century of crisis to hold their breath, until the tremor passed. On the mezzanine, a public hollow the size of a stadium replayed Earth's timeline in slow, stubborn pride. The evacuation of Miami, the first wind-tide farms in the Sahara, the blue-green of Mars's Tharsis plain unfolding beneath a storm shield, Europa's ice cracking like old bone around a heat-blooming station, the first Terran jump gate flaring to life above Luna with a brightness that made the night feel like a new morning. The feed shifted. The Galactic Senate's seal rotated into view, a wreath of 13 stylized spirals. Around a vertical stanchion of light, Vadra Prime's convergence hall swam into focus, its crystal dome casting prismatic rainbows over tiers of delegates. The audio came soft, then sharpened, trill, growl, click. A translator mesh obliged. "Roll call," intoned the speaker, a cephalomorphic being whose skin expressed mood in pulses of color. "By law and lattice we convene." Klein felt the familiar pressure in her ribs, the way the hall's acoustics seemed to compress even over light years. She'd stood under that dome once, during humanity's probationary seating, translating the language of a species that thought in angles and temperatures. She'd felt like a child at the foot of a cathedral built by weather. Now, across the ocean of the hall, she saw Ambassador Kellen Joe in Earth's seat, gray at the temples, posture precise, hands folded in a practiced clasp that suggested patience and massed fury. Beside him floated the compact silver lamina that carried Earth's voting credential, a quorum ring, its permissions braided into the galactic net, the quantum lattice that made and measured law. From one arm of the galaxy to the next, begin the motion, the speaker sighed. Pearl white, a new glyph appeared, Sanction Earth charges listed underneath like a resume rewritten to spite. Reckless technological asymmetry, aggressive patent sequestering, warp gate toll manipulation, failure to seed the Casimir cascade process, the trick of coaxing vacuum fluctuations to shoulder energy infrastructure for jump apertures. Jealousy made legal, Klein thought, and hated herself for the pettiness of the phrasing. The older civilizations weren't merely jealous, they were tired. Why should a species that had learned to walk on cosmic ice yesterday come striding into a ballroom and change the music? The feed cut to a split-screen mosaic, 100 faces, 100 anatomies. A sand column of the parietal league signaled I by letting its grains align with their magnetic poles. A pair of knot-bodied Jatian twins expressed dissent by braiding more tightly. A human mind without spectacle simply said no, and the lattice counted just as well. In low orbit, aboard the Terran Union carrier Ishmael, Chief Systems Architect Odette Namazi sat strapped in a bubble of smart glass and watched the same tally cascade across her retina. The dissolution protocol, a thought she refused to permit, hid in the corner of her awareness. Like a shadow you could convince yourself was a coat on a chair. She flicked it away and zoomed into the Senate's procedural sublayer. Every motion carried with it a swarm of token exchanges in the net. Authority transubstantiated into code, consent minted at femtosecond scales. It had fascinated Odette. Once the way culture resolved into logic, she heard her lead analyst, Reese, clearing his throat behind. If the measure passes with a supermajority, They can authorize interdiction without member state ratification. I know, Odette didn't turn. And if you finish that sentence with "we could," I will have you reassigned to ice scrape duty on Callisto. Reese closed his mouth. The hum of the Ishmael's field coils soothed no one. On Mars, under the newfound rain ticking softly against a ceramic greenhouse, children pressed palms to the leaves of engineered oaks and asked their teacher, who had served in the orbital guard, who still woke sometimes to the sound of missiles, that hadn't existed for 15 years, what Sanction meant. "It means someone takes your toys," she said, then winced. "It means someone takes the roads and the lights. It means someone decides you are a lesson for others." In the Convergence Hall, the accusations crystallized into a prosecutorial narrative. The Elix cartography, starfish-mantled and meticulous, spoke of Earth's tolls at the Sagan Gate, the Orden Compact, microbes in a sloshing crystal cylinder, seethed about the black boxing of the Casimir Cascade. Others invoked history like a cautionary ghost, the 13th collapse, when a young species had sparked a spiral war by hoarding a vaccine for stellar blight. When it was Earth's time, Kellen Joe rose. No translator softened his voice. "We have been on probation for 96 years, he said. "We accepted oversight. We paid extra tolls. We sent observers. We rebuilt our biosphere, not to please you, but because we had to. We shared habitat domes, salt-tolerant genomes, weather steering. We withheld the cascade because in our history, every weapon was an engine and every engine, if neglected, became a weapon." He folded his hands. "You call this avarice. I call it survival." Klein felt the old ache. She had watched Kellen testify against his own father in an anti-corruption tribunal, back when Earth's quantum governance was scrappy and experimental. The referendum mesh polis had not yet learned to dampen its manic swarms of decision. Kellen believed in process the way some believed in saints. Even defending Earth, he was apologizing for the mess of having made it so far so fast. A whisper bloom rippled through the hall, audible in certain gas-filled sacs, visible to those who could read the shiver of light across Carapace. The speaker pulsed ultraviolet for silence. "The motion stands," they said. "We proceed to vote." Mickle's hand closed on the back of Klein's chair. His knuckles had gone white. No one breathed in the Terran Council chamber. No one coughed in the market below the spire. No one refilled their coffee on the Ishmael. In that sliver of time between counting and knowing, hope was not noble. It was feral. A progress spiral began to fill. Names flickered and froze. I, the hegemony of Sci-Fi. The pelvic concord I. The virile dynasts abstain. Then, under a quiet pressure, Klein could almost feel through the glass. I, the Orati Symbiionts-no. Klein breathed in like a drowning woman remembering lungs. The Orati did nothing without an essay. Their light field avatars conferred with themselves, shedding petals of luminous script that meant caution, memory, a kind of benevolent fear, a beat. Then, no doubt, it didn't matter. The supermajority threshold was a cliff. Once over, grace counted for almost nothing. The progress spiral closed. The speaker dimmed to the color of storm ice. "By quorum and lattice," they said, "the motion passes. Effective immediately, the Galactic Senate imposes sanctions upon the Terran Union. Trade embargoes extend to existing contracts, with exception for humanitarian throughput as defined in Appendix." The voice became a droning thread, weaving through relief clauses and escalation ladders, all of it precise as a scalpel and just as kind. The convergence feeds spliced in enforcement overlays, interdiction fleets on gentle standby vectors, like swords held point down, escorts rerouted, docking rights rescinded at stations whose names had become familiar. To the everyday Terran Auriga's gate, Mahdi's lantern, Ghislaine spindle word sounds that had joined airport and harbor, and border in the language of getting somewhere. Reese swore softly on the Ishmael. Odette breathed out through her nose. "Worse than we modeled?" she asked. "Preposition ships at Lighton," he admitted. "So the rumor mill was right." "Rumors are how organisms metabolize fear," Odette said. Open channel to Nairobi, the Spire's council chamber filled with faces. The High Council, a quilt of continents and genders and ages. Some human only because the law required at least that degree of shared anatomy. Klein's image centered itself in the spread like a lighthouse lens. We will respond calmly, she said. Before they could ask the question, they had all agreed none of them would ask. Until the last possible second. We will keep our markets liquid internally. We will root around what we can, declare force majeure where we can't. We'll invite monitors. We'll be boring, an old man from the Indonesian archipelago, a rare holdout against neural interface, because ulcers had made his brain a place of sharp corners, made a brittle sound. Boring won't keep bulk freighters moving. Boring has kept nations from shooting. More times than I can count, Klein said. Another counselor's avatar fractured into frustrated polygons. The embargo makes our moon yards idle. Our farming colonies will be painted as luxury endeavors. President, we cannot cede the cascade. It is the spine of our... I am not suggesting we cede the cascade, Klein said. Her voice stayed level because it had to. I am suggesting we survive the first 48 hours without flinching. So the Senate learns that their leash slips on our necks. Kellen Joe's face winked into a side Payne Patchton from Vedra. The hall's acoustics made him sound like he was calling from inside a bell. Madam President, the Speaker has offered humanitarian corridors if we open our inspection logs to a mixed committee. How mixed? Klein asked. Mixed enough to be insulting, Kellen said, almost smiling. The Orati want a seat. That's to our advantage. The Symbians hate theater. They'll make it work or they'll walk. The Indonesian counselor leaned forward until his image pixelated. And if the enforcement fleets decide to test our compliance? Kellen's smile died. Then we see which captain wants to make their name the synonym for a war no one can afford. Klein pressed her fingers against the cool edge of the table. The temptation to rage was hot and simple. She could feel speeches growing in her throat like teeth. You fear us because we learned to fix what we broke. You fear us because we are still breaking things and fixing them faster. You call our scarcity a crime because you forgot scarcity ever existed. Instead, she said, we will file an appeal. A pause, then laughter bitter, disbelieving not because the appeal would succeed, but because the sentence steadied the room. Process like a handrail in a burning building. The convergence feed bled back into the chamber. The speaker now reading from procedures for compliance verification. A small, jagged sense of the surreal edged everything. They could hear a government across light years explain, in immaculate nuance, how to slowly starve a planet that had once nearly starved itself on the Ishmael. Odette shut down Reese's angry gesture with a glance. Spin up internal redundancy. Assume lattice latency will wobble while they rekey half their registries. Run simulations on orbital trade under embargo conditions. And Reese, yeah. Find me all the places their protocol commits trust to a single cuff link. He blinked. A what? A fancy way of saying weak point, Odette said, and finally allowed herself to look at the shadow in the corner of her mind. The dissolution protocol wasn't a weapon. It was a veto, elevated to metaphysics. They had built it because every empire puts a red button in a glass box and tells itself, no one will ever lift the hammer. She had argued against it. She had lost. Then she had hidden it so well she sometimes forgot where she started and the hiding ended. Dr. Namazi, Reese said carefully. We are not, Odette said, and cut the channel before the word yet could blossom between them. Down in the markets. Vendors slotted their drone fleets from interstellar routes to local. The algorithm had updated on its own. A boy 15, with a bioluminescent tattoo of the Sagan gate on his forearm, because being born after something does not mean you were not born into it, bargained loud for a bag of salt-dried kelp strips. His grandmother, who had grown up with ration booklets printed on onion skin paper, shifted her stance in a way that meant she would start saving jars again. Because glass, unlike trust, you could keep on Vedra Prime. Under a dome that had watched wars bloom and wither like weeds, Kellen sat as the hall emptied. Delegates drifted in clusters toward galleries where they would discuss Earth in the past tense. An Orati avatar, shedding light like pollen, drifted to him. We opposed, it said. Its voice a chord, and yet the chorus drowns us. I noticed, Kellen said. The Orati's light wilted to a thoughtful amber. Your people are fast. We do not say this as praise or censure. We say it as a fact. Speed is a solvent. Kellen pinched the bridge of his nose. You're telling me to slow down. We are telling you the lattice is old, the Orati said. Old things survive by becoming many. The Senate made itself a single thing. It has forgotten how to be a forest. Kellen looked up. And Earth is a fire, said the Orati, and dimmed away. Night rolled over Nairobi with the theatricality of a system that had learned to keep itself interesting even under careful management. In the spire, Klein stepped back onto the roof. The solar sails shivered in a high-altitude draft. She looked at the jump beacons again and imagined them black. She thought of the first time she had stood at a dock as a child, counting ships and not yet knowing the difference between leaving and arriving. What the Senate had done today tried to collapse that difference to zero, to pin a world in place. Her personal mesh pinged with a message. From Kellen Joe, no preamble. He didn't do preambles. They will expect us to beg the right way. Klein typed, we will. She waited. Then added, and we will do something else. The cursor pulsed. Then understood. Klein closed her eyes and saw all the map-strayed flows, migratory corridors. Ideas moving like weather fronts, the silver thread of the galactic net running through them. She thought of cufflinks and forests, of patience as strategy and patience as trap. She opened her eyes to the city and said, out loud, because she didn't want the thought to exist only as a packet on someone else's lattice. We will not be caged. Far above, the Ishmael rotated in its slow orbit, a bright bead stitched to the planet by gravity and need. In its core, Odette Namazi stood alone before a dormant thing and promised it, with all the sincerity of a liar who wishes to be honest, that she would never knock on its glass. Beyond them all, Vedra Prime glittered like a jewel embedded in dark velvet, and the Convergence Hall's lights went out one by one. The Senate had spoken with the authority of a chorus. The Ishmael's war room was not built like the war rooms of Earth's past. No maps dotted with pins, no generals hunched over plastic models. Instead, it was a hollow sphere of dark glass suspended in the ship's midsection, its surface etched with billions of microprojectors. When in session, it came alive with the entire galaxy. Trade routes shimmered like veins of molten gold. Enforcement fleets hung like gnats in angry orbit around jump gates. And the galactic net spread across the stars like a spiderweb of thought turned into law. President Amara Klein stood at the sphere's equator, hands clasped behind her back, while around her floated the avatars of Earth's High Council. They flickered in with delays a millisecond from Nairobi, 3 seconds from Mars, 6 from Europa, each taking their accustomed shape. Some chose realism, others symbolism. A woman in her 80s who appeared as the goddess Mawulisa split into sun and moon. A climate scientist who manifested as a flock of starlings that spoke in unison. Let us state the choice, said Klein, her voice filling the chamber. The sanctions will choke us if left unchallenged. They are not mere inconvenience. They are a siege without the name. Our colonies depend on foreign alloys. Our freighters rely on Senate docking clearances. Within half a year, our expansion stalls. Within a decade, we regress. Unless she let the word hang, deliberate as a blade being unsheathed. Unless we do the unthinkable. The war room shifted. The galactic map faded, and in its place rose a single construct, a cube of burning blue. Its faces covered with crawling glyphs. Some looked like letters, others resembled scars. This was the dissolution protocol. Gasps, even among veterans of the council. Dr. Odette Namazi stepped forward from her node. Her avatar was understated, a woman in a gray coat, hair tied severely back, eyes tired. She did not waste time on theater. I designed the framework, she said, reluctantly. It was authorized under Directive Umbra in 2132, during the war scare with the Virel dynasts. I argued it should never be finished. I lost that argument. What you see is not a bomb, not in the physical sense. It is an exploit. The Senate's power is not in fleets, or domes, or even the weight of tradition. It is in the net, the lattice that validates every law, every fleet order, every trade contract. Authority, in our era, is nothing but authenticated consensus. The dissolution protocol does not destroy the net. It teaches it to forget the Senate. The glyphs rippled as though agreeing. Counselor Ulysses Morel, who represented the orbital habitats, frowned. Explain in terms suitable for those of us who are not. Hackers, Odette folded her arms. Imagine a cathedral held up by flying buttresses. You can't knock the walls down there to thick, but if you cut the mortar from the right stones, the whole structure lists and falls under its own weight. The protocol doesn't launch missiles or melt circuits. It identifies quorum verifiers, the nodes that confirm the Senate's authority, and corrupts their permissions. Without quorum, the Senate cannot issue law. Its decrees become gossip. Enforcement fleets find their command codes invalid. Contracts cannot be executed. The cathedral collapses, and all that remains are freestanding chapels, the sovereign polities themselves. Silence. The council absorbed the vision, a galaxy suddenly ungoverned. Every civilization cut free to drift or clash. It would mean chaos, murmured Counselor Njeri Mabatha from Nairobi, her avatar wearing the feathers of a crown crane. Billions of lives depend on Senate stability. Trade routes collapse, arbitration vanishes. Do you propose to burn down the house because our neighbors are rude? They are not rude, said Klein evenly. They are starving us. They mean to keep us in the cellar until we are too weak to climb the stairs. Chaos already waits. The question is whether we unleash it ourselves or let it fall upon us when we are helpless. From the far edge of the sphere, Kellanjo's avatar materialized, Paxton from Vedra Prime. His face was drawn. Behind him, faintly, the glitter of the Convergence Hall's dome still loomed, though now it was empty. I have spent my life defending the Senate as a framework, he said. I believed it could evolve, adapt, but I have seen the contempt in their eyes. To them, Earth is not a peer but a trespasser. They do not want us slow. They want us obedient. I say we cut their leash. The protocol must be considered. His words sparked an argument that ricocheted around the war room. Cut the leash, and we will drown in a galaxy of wolves, cried Mabatha. Better wolves than jailers, countered Morel, without the Senate's arbitration. Trade disputes will become wars. They already send fleets to our gates. That is war by another name. Amara Klein let the voices rise, then raised her hand. The chamber dimmed, and all voices fell silent. You mistake me, she said softly. This is not a vote to deploy the protocol. Not yet. This is a vote to prepare it, to bring it to readiness, so that if the Senate tightens the noose, we have more than protest and appeals. Odette inclined her head. I can awaken the framework. It will take time. Weeks, perhaps months. But once armed, it cannot remain dormant indefinitely. The Senate audits the net constantly. Eventually they would notice. And if they notice, they will know. They will know, echoed Joe, his voice iron. And by then, it will be too late. After the session adjourned, Odette walked alone through the Ishmael's quiet corridors. The ship's crew moved with forced calm, but she could feel their unease in the way they lingered near consoles, the way conversations hushed when she passed. Everyone knew she was the keeper of the glass box with the red button. She entered the secure vault, a room lined with braided superconductors that hummed faintly like a hive. In its center floated a crystalline interface, the keywell. With a gesture, she summoned the glyph cube of the protocol again. It hovered before her, whispering in a language of permissions and denials. Do you want to be born? She asked it quietly, as though speaking to a child. It did not answer, but the glyphs pulsed in patterns that felt almost like breath. She thought of Reese's question earlier. We're not. He hadn't finished, but she knew the word he'd choked on, yet. The terrible truth. The protocol was elegant. Too elegant. A scalpel sharper than any blade she had ever devised. If unleashed, it would not stop until the Senate's backbone was gone. There would be no halfway measure. The galaxy would wake to find itself ungoverned, and Earth would bear the blame or the credit. Odette rested her forehead against the cool glass of the keywell. God forgive us, she whispered, though she wasn't sure if Earth still believed in gods. Behind her, the ship's hum deepened, as if the Ishmael itself had heard and was waiting. On Vedra Prime, Kellanjo remained in his embassy quarters long after the council session ended. Outside, the city pulsed with alien lights, celebrations from species who had voted aye ringing through the avenues. Sanctioning Earth was a victory to them, a chastisement of an upstart species. Joe poured a glass of water and stared at his own reflection. He remembered his father's tribunal, the way truth had cut their family in half. He remembered standing in the Convergence Hall as a young man, believing the Senate was the pinnacle of civilization. Now he saw the rot in its foundations. He sent a coded message through a narrow-band quantum channel to Klein. The protocol is our last resort, but if we do not act, Earth will wither. Choose carefully, President. You will not just change our future, you will end theirs. He hesitated, then deleted the last sentence before sending. Some truths were too heavy, even for the lattice dot in the deep vaults of the Ishmael. The protocol's glyphs continued to pulse, unseen. A shadow in the galaxy's operating system. A knife waiting for the hand that would dare to lift it. And across the stars, the Senate slept, unaware that its centuries of dominion balanced on the thin silence of human restraint. The Convergence Hall had never lost power. In 5,000 years of operation, across wars and collapses, famine and plague, the hall's dome had always glowed. Delegates might scream or boycott, fleets might encircle rebellious worlds, but the hall remained the cathedral of consensus, the machine of law. Until Earth pulled the thread. The Chamber Ambassador Kellenjo stood at his plinth in the tier reserved for probationary members. Though Earth had technically passed probation decades ago, the insult was deliberate, and today it burned worse than usual. Around him, the Convergence Hall roared with accusation. Earth manipulates tolls at the Sagan Gate. Earth hoards the Casimir Cascade. Earth destabilizes the spiral by expansion unchecked. The voices belonged to 100 unatomies, resonant sacs, magnetic grains, tendrils vibrating in chemical chords, but the translators carried them all as anger. Kellen did not rise. He folded his hands, eyes steady, while the chorus swelled. He had been briefed that morning. The dissolution protocol was armed. President Klein's message had been simple. Wait for the signal. The world will know when. The world. He looked up at the dome and thought, no, the galaxy. The Ishmael and Jupiter orbit. The Terran Union carrier Ishmael carried not weapons, but something far more dangerous. Deep in its core, Odette Namazi stood before the keywell, her hand hovering inches from the interface. Her team was silent around her, the air thick with restraint. Reese licked his lips, whispered, we don't get another chance. Once we light it, there's no, I know, Odette snapped. She hated the tremor in her own voice. The protocol was a lattice parasite, a self-propagating correction to the Senate's operating system. It didn't attack, it simply revoked permissions. Like an immune system deciding the host's brain was a foreign body. Once released, it would spread along the galactic net, touching every node, every quorum verifier. Odette closed her eyes. For a moment she saw the cathedral her metaphor had built, arches collapsing, buttresses shearing, the dome splitting under its own grandeur. She had loved that cathedral once, but Earth had been left at its door, shivering. She opened her eyes and lowered her hand. The protocol leapt. The first flicker it began with silence. In the hall, mid-sentence. The speaker's quorum ring dimmed. The convergence glyphs behind them hiccuped, letters collapsing into squiggles. Delegates muttered in irritation, as if the net were merely buffering. Then the first orders failed. A Virel Dynast fleet at Mahdi's Lantern received an update packet blank. Captains entered override codes rejected. Their weapons systems, dependent on Senate authentication, went dark. Docking clearances at the Auriga Gate vanished mid-cycle, stranding dozens of freighters. Arbitration courts found their registries wiped. Contracts worth trillions reduced to corrupted hash. In the hall, confusion grew. The speaker pulsed ultraviolet for calm, but their quorum ring no longer glowed. They tried to call a recess. The lattice did not recognize their authority. The collapseth protocol spread like fire across silk. Nodes blinked, permissions unraveled, quorum counters dissolved. The Galactic Senate's entire identity, the weight of millennia, was written in the net. And the net now shrugged. Delegates began to panic. Some screamed sabotage. Others accused rival species of treachery. A contingent of the Orden Compact tried to storm the speaker's platform, their crystalline bodies clattering like breaking glass. Kellenjo finally stood. Esteemed delegates, he said, voice amplified across the hall. You have sanctioned Earth for being what you feared, clever, swift, unwilling to kneel. And so we have acted, not with fleets, not with fire, but with truth. His words rippled, met with outrage, disbelief. You built your Senate on a lie that it was eternal. But law without consent is dust. Authority without trust is noise. Today you learn that dust cannot bind and noise cannot rule. The hall erupted. Some species fled, others tried to seize Kellen. But the guards no longer knew whose orders to follow. The quorum rings had gone dark on every plinth. There was no Senate, not anymore. Only a chamber full of voices, none louder than the rest. The galaxy reacts in Mars. Feeds sputtered, then burst alive with news. The Senate had gone offline. Citizens stared as docking fees vanished from their ledgers. Embargo restrictions dissolved. Enforcement fleets went adrift. Merchants cheered. Farmers wept. Some feared worse, that the galaxy would now turn on Earth with vengeance. In the orbital habs, Morel watched the data cascade and muttered, "We just broke the universe's spine." In Nairobi, Klein stood before the High Council, calm though her pulse hammered. "We have not broken it," she said. "We have unbound it. Now the galaxy chooses, freedom or chaos. VI. The speaker's silency in Vedra Prime. The speaker tried again and again to command the hall. Their body flushed crimson, indigo, pearl, but the lattice ignored them. They were color without consequence. They collapsed, exhausted, their light dimming. For the first time in history, the Convergence Hall was just a room. Kellen watched in silence, feeling no triumph. The protocol had worked too well. Earth had dissolved the Senate. But he knew what came next: the scramble, the vacuum, the wolves circling, and humanity would be blamed, or worshipped, or both. VII. Odette's guilt in the Ishmael. Odette sat alone in the vault, the protocol's cube now blank. She had killed a cathedral with a keystroke. She whispered, "God forgive me," though she knew forgiveness was not coded into the net. Then she raised her head, eyes hard. "But Earth will not beg again." President Amara Klein stood in the council chamber of the Pan-African Spire, Nairobi. Every feed, every holo, every lattice link across the galaxy had been hijacked by Terran signal. The alien press called it crude. The technicians called it impossible. Either way, all eyes were on her. Behind her, Earth's flag pulsed as light. Not cloth stars in a spiral, a single blue orb in the center. Delegates of the galaxy. Klein began. Her voice was even, without theatrics. "You sought to bind us with sanctions. You sought to make Earth kneel. In doing so, you reminded us that the Senate was never a council of equals. It was a throne, and we were its subjects." She looked straight into the feed, into the millions of alien eyes that watched. Today that throne is dust. The Senate is dissolved not by fire, not by invasion, but by its own fragility. Authority written in a machine cannot survive when its machine forgets. She let the silence stretch. Some delegates squirmed in their seats across the stars. Others leaned closer. "We will not replace the Senate with another throne. The age of decrees is over. From this day forward, every world chooses its own path, ally, rival, or adversary. But never again, master and subject." The feed cut. For the first time in galactic history, there was no central voice to answer. 2. Reactions in Vedra Prime. Chaos ruled the Convergence Hall. Delegates fled, leaving abandoned quorum rings that no longer glowed. The speakers sat motionless, their colors dimming into shades of mourning. For them, it was not just a government that had ended, it was a religion. Among the Orati symbionts, light fields burst in conflicted blooms. Some hailed Earth as liberators. Others whispered that Earth had unleashed anarchy. The Orden Compact screamed treachery and vowed to rebuild the Senate without humans. The Virel dynasts quietly began recalling fleets, testing the new freedom, and in thousands of lesser polities, worlds that had long chafed under Senate tariffs and quotas cheered. "The leash is broken," they sang in their markets. "The leash is broken." 3. The wolves stir. Kalen Joe did not sleep. His embassy quarters on Vedra became a fortress, walls vibrating with the arguments of allies and the threats of enemies. Delegations sought him out in secret. The Elix cartography offered a packed Earth. Shares the Cascade process. They grant protection. The Pelphic Concord demanded reparations or war. The Orati symbionts asked only one question: "Do you understand what you have done?" Kellen's answer was always the same: yes, but alone. In the rare moments when the channels went quiet, he admitted the truth to himself. No one could understand what had been done. Not yet. IV. The council divides in Nairobi. The High Council convened. The chamber was heavy with consequence. We have unleashed wolves, Mabatha said. The compact, the dynasts, the Concord each will carve what they can. Without law, every border is a battlefield. We have also unleashed opportunity, Morel countered. Colonies can trade without Senate tolls. Innovation will explode. Our moonyards will build unshackled. It will be chaos. It will be freedom. The room fractured into factions, isolationists who demanded Earth retreat and fortify its gates, expansionists who saw the chance to seize hegemony, and idealists who spoke of a federation of equals. Klein listened, her face unreadable. Then she said, "We did not shatter the Senate to replace it with another cage. If we rise, it must be by covenant, not conquest." The chamber quieted, but doubt lingered via Odette's reckoning on the Ishmael. Odette Namazi wandered the secure vault where the dissolution protocol had once pulsed. Now the cube was gone, burned out like a star collapsing into silence. She could not escape the weight. Billions of beings across the galaxy now lived in uncertainty. Because of a weapon she had built, she tried to remind herself of Earth's starvation, the embargoes, the fleets poised at their gates. She tried to remember the necessity, but necessity was not absolution. Reese found her staring at the blank keywell. "You did it," he said softly. "You broke the spine of the galaxy." "No," Odette said. Her voice was flat, but her eyes were wet. "I showed the galaxy it never had a spine at all, VI." The first Flamesthi new age did not wait long to reveal itself. At Mahdi's lantern. To freighters, one Orden, one Terran claimed the same dock. Now that Senate arbitration was void. The dispute escalated to weapons. 3 ships burned before the station ejected them both. At the Auriga gate, smugglers ran convoys past what had once been enforcement fleets. The fleets, unable to authenticate orders, splintered, half drifting home, half turning pirate. On Mars, colonists cheered as embargo restrictions dissolved overnight. Factories lit up, engines roared, a fever of freedom gripped the young world. Chaos and freedom, wolves and opportunity. The new order. Klein addressed the council again weeks later. Weary but resolute, the galaxy is now what it always claimed to be: sovereign. No Senate, no decrees. Only worlds, strong or weak, honest or treacherous. It is a dangerous age, but it is also ours to shape. She let her gaze sweep across them. We must decide not only how Earth survives, but how Earth leads. And for the first time since the vote, a murmur of unity rose from the chamber. VIII. Kellen's reflection. Vedra. Kellen walked the abandoned convergence hall. Dust already gathered where the quorum rings had dimmed. He stood in the center of the dome, whispering to ghosts, "You called us children. You called us reckless. Perhaps you were right, but children grow, and the reckless inherit the world." His words echoed, unchallenged. The hall was no longer a senate. It was just a room. The age of Sovereinsacros. The spiral arms. Signals crackled. Treaties signed in backrooms. Fleets launched without permission. Markets blooming overnight. No one waited for decrees. No one asked the Senate for permission, because the Senate no longer existed. The galaxy had entered a new era. Some called it anarchy. Some called it liberation. But all called it the Age of Sovereigns. And at its heart stood Earth, once sanctioned, once shackled, now the species that had toppled the oldest order in the stars. Humanity, the architects of rebellion, would now have to learn how to be architects of something greater, or watch the galaxy burn in the fire they had lit.